So in today's show, we're going to talk about how to make that jump from a broker or an agent to that of a real estate investor. If you've ever wanted to make the jump and you're a broker and or a real estate agent, today's show is for you. But before we hop in today's episode, if you have not been to our website, go to nolimitsrealestateinvesting.com/script and grab a copy of the Motivated Seller script. This is the exact same script we've used to lock up over 1,400 wholesale deals, and we've modified it over the years, and this is our latest version. And so if you want the script that's responsible not only for those 1,400 but of tens of thousands of deals across the nation, go ahead and download it at nolimitsrealestateinvesting.com/script. Also want to do a shout out to one of our bootcamp training members, and that is Kyle, the creator, who just closed a $90,000 novation deal. And this is a deal that he got under contract, I believe, for $900,000 and sold a little over $1 million. And so after commissions and fees, he earned around $90,000. Heard that on our coaching call this morning. So Kyle, awesome job. Those are a few hurdles that he had to get over, but heck, the $90,000 was worth it. Also, if you'd like to hook up with me in one of my favorite Facebook groups, head on over to wholesalingincgroup.com, hit at Todd Toback, or tag me at Todd Toback. Love to meet you and chat and hear what your wins and successes are. All right, so let's talk about this. You're a broker or you're a real estate agent, and you're like, Todd, I want to be a real estate investor. And by the way, if you're not a broker or an agent, or maybe you're an investor and you're thinking about becoming a broker and an agent and kind of bolting this on, today's episode is for you. So number one is, here's the good news, is that if you're a broker or an agent, I have never met anybody who has been upset that they made the switch to being an investor from a broker or an agent. Well, why is that? Well, the average transaction size for most real estate agents is going to be about 3% of the purchase price, maybe 2.5%, maybe a little bit less, right? And so let's just say you're selling $300,000 houses or $400,000 houses. You know, you're looking at an average commission of $10,000 to $12,000. And if you have a broker or somebody else who you're splitting with, you know, you might be getting anywhere from $6,000 to $9,000 on that. And if you're a listener of this podcast, you know that my goal for you is to do those $30,000, $35,000, $50,000, even $100,000 assignment fees / wholesale fees. If you listen to Kyle, that I just gave a shout out to earlier, did $90,000 on one transaction. And I got to tell you, being an agent or a broker is, in my opinion, a lot harder than being a real estate investor. Think about the average listing agent. Think about what they have to do, right? They have to do their marketing. They have to then meet with sellers whose timeline usually sometimes is 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. And these sellers, you know, they're expecting retail, right? Sellers who call agents are expecting to sell their houses for top dollar. So now you have to meet with them, with every other agent in town who's trying to get their listing, and you have to tell them how beautiful their home is. And then you have to set their expectation of the reality of their price, right? Remember, you're not dealing with motivated sellers typically, okay? That's the exception of when you're actually seeking motivated sellers, right? And then you have to list the house. You have to walk them through a long nurturing process, which is a lot different than real estate agents. And then you have to prep them to sell their house most of the time to retail buyers who are going to expect all kinds of repairs on the property in a normal market. And so these transactions typically, once you actually get the listing, which sometimes takes 3, 4, 5, 6 months, usually take 4, 5, 6 months to close, right? Of course, there are exceptions to that. Some are shorter, some are longer, some never sell, which really suck. And so I hope I'm not rubbing salt in the wound if you're listening to this and you are a real estate agent. I'm sure, by the way, there are $1 million agents out there, people making a lot of money on luxury houses. And hey, shout out to you. And if you're happy with that, this episode is not for you. But if you're listening to this, you are thinking, Todd, I need to make a change. And what I just said, I probably just poured a little salt in that wound, right? You should feel that sting. And so that was my goal. So number one, if you're going to make the decision, and this is probably the really number one was I never met anyone who's upset they actually made the switch. But number two, my point I'm going to make is you got to cut the cord, right? You got to commit and saying, hey, you know what? I want to be a real estate investor. I'm not going to dabble in this. I'm not going to just be a little curious. I don't want to be an agent anymore. I don't want to be a broker anymore. You've got to go full bore into being a real estate investor. Okay. By the way, that should be a little bit of a foreshadowing. I don't believe that you can do both well. I think if you try to do both, you're going to do both extremely mediocre. And I'll come back to that. There is no such thing as a hybrid agent. Okay. And that is an agent who is a really good full-time real estate investor and somebody who's a full-time real estate agent. Too many issues there. I'm going to get into that. One of the reasons why, okay, you should not become a hybrid agent is you will be tempted every time you meet with a motivated seller to try to convert a potential deal into a 3% listing. Right. So let's just say you're meeting with a motivated seller. You sent out a piece of, or you sent out a postcard. And by the way, I'm assuming that if you're listening to this episode, you know what wholesaling is, right? We find motivated sellers who have a problem, who have a piece of real estate, and they don't want it. And so we negotiate to purchase their price for their house for below market value so that we can lock it up and then sell it to a buyer at a much higher price, right? Well, when we do that, we experience resistance to that with most sellers that we talk to, right? Let's say you talk to 50 to 100 people, only 1 to 3 people are really going to be interested in doing business with you. But those 1 to 3, okay, have the potential to be 30, 40, 50, even $100,000 each if you do it right. The problem is if you're a real estate agent and you have this tool in your toolbox and you're meeting with a seller and somebody gives you a little bit of resistance, an agent's first reaction is to say, you know what? I could list your house for you, right? Instead of buying it from you. Oh, what a killer. Now you've given the sellers 2 options and you really are chasing the seller now, right? Do you want A or do you want B? And I can't stand that, right? The seller now has uncertainty. You've given them more to think about. And now you've actually put yourself in a level playing field with other agents. And so that's why I hate that. You kind of have to burn the ships, in my opinion. Okay, the second reason why I hate the hybrid agent, people who try to remain an agent and become an investor, is that there's an inherent conflict of interest, right? If a seller calls you and you are going to be quote unquote representing them, right? They think that you are basically representing their best interest, trying to get them the best price. And then you switch to buying their house for cash. You know, for me, there's number one, a perceived legal conflict of interest there, right? This person thinks that you're there representing them, and now you're going in and trying to buy their house 50 cents on the dollar. I do not like to blur the line. Okay, for me, by the way, I have no problem with an investor trying to buy a house 50 cents on the dollar, but the seller should be clear that that's what you're there to do, right? Not that you're their agent, and then you're going to steer them to selling the house to you. So that's why I like to be clear. Hey, listen, I'm not here to list your house. I'm here to buy it, give you a quick cash offer. I'll close in 30 days. You don't have to make any repairs. You can leave everything behind. And I'm going to take all the stress away, right? That's what investors do. Real estate agents, their job is to get you top dollar, sell to a retail buyer, take you through the inspection and repair process, walk you through the paperwork, and look out for your best interests. Both are fine, but you should not blur the line between 2. Okay, you can't be hot and cold at the same time. Okay, it should be clear. Okay, the next thing though I'm going to talk about, I hinted on this earlier, is you're giving the seller too many options. A confused mind says no. So if you're meeting with a seller, we often take for granted that they should be able to take the 2 options, make the decision, and saying, wow, I can choose which one is best for me. I find that most sellers want to be led down a path. And so if you give them one option and one option only, you're much more likely to get one than one of 2. And after years of dealing with motivated sellers, I just notice when sellers are confused or you give them too many options, they just freeze and say no. So I can't stand that option of, hey, I can list your house or I could buy it for cash. So hopefully I've convinced you that being the hybrid agent is not good. Okay, I see. And by the way, I have data on this. I have never, and I've been coaching real estate since 2000. I've been involved in real estate since 2002. I've been coaching people probably since 2006. So that's 14, that's 17 years I've been coaching people. I have never met a successful broker who was also a successful real estate agent. Excuse me, a successful broker who is also a successful real estate investor at the same time, right? I see mediocrity when they try to do both. Sure, are there real estate brokers who have bought a couple of pieces of property? Yes. But I'm talking about you want to make your investing activities full-time, all in, do deals, do $100,000 months, and build massive, massive, massive net worth. I just don't see it, right? Because they're always towing the line and they're distracted, and they're also distracting their sellers. So hopefully you're ready to burn the ships. You're ready to make the jump. You're saying, you know what, Todd? I'm tired of working for 3%. I want the big money. Welcome to excellence. Okay, so I'm going to give you some things that you can do right now that are going to help you along your journey. Number one, you've got to convince yourself you are worthy, okay, of big deals. So there's this little thing, I've talked about this a lot, that's called default. Okay, if you go and you read a book by James Newman, and it's called Release Your Brakes. They talked about default. And default is something where it's how much money we make, how much money we're used to, right? The people who we're around, the weight that we're comfortable at, right? The friends who we like to hang out with. And I can tell you that default is so dangerous. And so if you're used to making, I don't know, $15,000 a deal or $10,000 a deal or $6,000 a deal, then you're going to have a really, really hard time breaking out of that pattern. So, number one, you've got to convince yourself, hey, listen, I'm tired of working for $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a deal. I want to make 50. And you're going to have to force yourself out of that pattern. You're like, Todd, I could definitely convince myself I'm worthy of 50 grand a deal. Okay, prove it. Go out there and make 50 grand a deal. So how do you do that? Number one is that you've got to have a target, right? And so you've got to tell yourself the target. You've got to write the target. And when you meet with that first motivated seller, you are going to make, okay, in your mind, you are going to make at least $50,000. And of course, you're going to have some fear around that. And when you talk to a motivated seller, you're going to be like, there's no way they're going to accept my offer, right? Your brain, your default's going to try to drag you back in, but you got to break out of that. All right. So convince yourself you are worthy about it. Okay. Focus on the goal and it will happen. Number two is understand that your job as an investor is to become a hero to your seller by solving an acute pain for them. Okay. Your job is to take pain away from them. In exchange for you taking pain, they're going to give you some of their equity in exchange for some speed and convenience and you taking away that pain. Your job is not that of a fiduciary. What is a fiduciary? A fiduciary is someone who is paid to look after the best interests of the seller, like lawyers or accountants or doctors, where they have these oaths to say, hey, you know what? My job is to look out for your best interests. And by the way, if you're a real estate agent, in my mind, top dollar at the best terms is probably that line where you should be trying to get your seller. But if you're an investor, right, it's clear you're not that, right? I'm going to give you speed and convenience for exchange for equity. And by the way, I use that language all the time. But you turn off that switch, right, by being a full-time investor, and you kind of let go of the whole broker thing. It does wonders, but you're gonna have a hard time mentally breaking free of that. You know, I have a lot of clients who, you know, they really get stuck. Like, oh, if the seller says no, you know, can I offer to list their property? And I can tell you that never works. All right. Number three. So now that you know that you are worthy of big deals, now you know that you are there to relieve pain and be a hero instead of a fiduciary. Number three, hopefully, maybe if you're a broker and agent, you got to market like hell. Okay, you got to generate leads every single day. And because your average deal is going to be $50,000, you actually can spend more money than your competition as a broker, right? Brokers, if you're making $12,000, you really don't want to be spending more than $1,000 or $2,000 a deal. If you're a real estate investor, you can spend $5,000, $6,000 to get a deal so that you can make 50, right? And so you must have a marketing calendar, and I talk about this, where you are putting the marketing that you're doing every single month. Okay, so by the way, if you want a free copy of the one that we use, it's just an Excel spreadsheet. It's got the dates on there. You got to market like hell. Okay, so go to nolimitsrealestateinvesting.com/calendar to get your free calendar. Okay, the next part about this, and I've talked about this in other shows, you got to generate leads, but now you got to follow up. Okay, you got to follow up with those leads. A lot of the leads who thought they wanted retail, this is the beauty of this, right? Where you think they want to list it. And this is where you have to be careful of the line because things change fast. So let's assume that somebody had some kids living in the property and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to list the property and my kids are going to cooperate, and they were living there rent free. And all of a sudden now the kids won't move out. Believe me, I see this all the time. Now you've set these expectations with a seller that you were going to sell for top retail, and now they can't get their kids out, right? Well, only an investor is going to buy that, but now you've anchored them on this other side. You don't want to do that, right? And so when you follow up as an investor and you stay as an investor, when people say no to your initial offer, time and circumstances change everything. And I've seen people who wanted retail one day and were happy to give away 40% of their equity the next because they couldn't get a property vacant. And that includes real estate agents who actually own real estate and rent to family. By the way, some of my favorite kinds of leads. The next thing I'm going to talk about is closing your first investing deal as fast as possible, right? I talked about default. You got to prove the concept to yourself. You've probably seen investors make $40,000, $50,000 a deal, maybe even 100, maybe even 7 figures. And you're like, I would like to do that. But your old self is going to try to suck you back in. This happens in any area of business. So now that you're marketing, you're following up, you want to close the deal, your first deal, as fast as humanly possible. And by the way, today's podcast was specifically for brokers and real estate agents. But also, if you're thinking about becoming a broker and adding this to your repertoire, right, this should hopefully help you convince yourself that adding yourself as a broker or an agent is a really, really bad idea. And that's going to be my last point. But you want to stay away from default, okay, your old self, by doing your first real estate deal as fast as humanly possible. Now, let me give you the objection that kills most brokers and agents becoming an investor. They're like, oh, well, I have access to the MLS, right? And so I have all these advantages and I can pull comps, and comps are like comparable sales, right? And I have access to lawyers in my office and my broker, it gives me all these advantages. Oh yeah? How is that working out for you right now, right? Probably not so good, because otherwise you wouldn't be like wanting the life of an investor. You can have all the benefits of being a real estate agent or a broker without being a broker, and none of the headaches. By the way, just FYI, one other thing I didn't add. Once you become a broker or a real estate agent, you actually fall underneath your local real estate board. And you have to, number one, in most states, you now are governed by them. You have to listen to them. You're under their jurisdiction. In most states, if you're not a broker or an agent, you are not underneath their jurisdictions. And I don't have to follow all of these rules that I would need to follow if I was a broker and agent. So that's another thing I wanted to add in there. But let's talk about the advantages. So brokers, they have access to the multiple listing service. They have access to getting comparables. Maybe they have a broker they could talk to, maybe a legal department. Maybe they get some free forms. All of that is available. Number one of my suggestions is get a broker to work for you, right? The advantages of brokers or working with a broker is that they don't get paid up front, right? So I'm going to give a broker that I work with maybe a piece of all the deals that they sell for me, but they've got to pull comparable sales. They got to show my properties. They have to take pictures, all the dirty work that you used to do to make smaller commissions. I now am going to partner with a broker to make sure that happens. If I need comps that I can't get someplace else, which there are a ton of other places to get it between Redfin now and PropStream and all these other things, I don't need that. But let's just say I did. I could just call my broker who works with me and call them and use their market expertise. And if you need legal help, which is rare, right? You can hire a lawyer because you're making $50,000 a deal, right? You're going for 7 figures. So I'm going to review. Number one, I've never met anybody who was a broker and agent who became an investor who says, man, I wish I would have stayed a broker or an agent, right? It's always the other way around. Number two, you got to cut the cord. None of this hybrid agent crap. I've never seen anyone do both well. I have seen people do both, but I've seen people really, really struggle this way and their income go down. Either decide to be the best broker you can be or become a real estate agent. Number three is that if you try to do both, you'll always be tempted to go in for the listing at any sign of resistance of getting a low price on the house. Okay, number four, there's a conflict of interest, which I hate, right? And if you're falling underneath all the regulations of being a broker or an agent, and then you have to try to buy a house at 50 cents on the dollar, I don't like the conflict of interest. I like sellers to know that I'm an investor and only an investor. Number five is when you're a broker or an agent and you're trying to either pitch them on 2 options, a confused mind says no, right? Go in there, do one thing really, really, really well. Sellers should know that they're going to trade some equity for speed and convenience. Next, though, once you make the decision, convince yourself you are worthy of big deals. Okay? Focus on 50K. Number two, understand that you are a hero to solve problems, but you are not a fiduciary to the seller. 3, market like hell. You need leads. 4, follow up like a banshee. 5, close the deal and don't go back to default. And 6, if you're like, Todd, I don't want to give them all my advantages of a broker. There aren't any advantages. There are only liabilities. So go out there, cut the cord, drop your license, do a 50K deal, and become the hero. Don't forget to head on over to nolimitrealestateinvesting.com/script to get a copy of that motivated seller script. And I will talk to you on the next episode.